Hi, I'm Akash from Ministry of Films, and today we have Rahul Desai, who is a film critic and also who also writes a lot of articles about sports. Um, I wanted to get him here to not just talk about film criticism, but also as a person who has watched so many films since so many years to know the history. Also, as a fellow cinema buff, to discuss cinema and I would want to start with your introduction to films, right? Like when you were a lot younger, and how exactly did you get introduced to films, and what kind of films did you get introduced to? First?
When I was younger, I like everyone else, almost every other child in India. We all watch a lot of Hindi films. I grew up in Ahmedabad, and it's a Gujarat in general has a very Bollywood crazy culture, especially
Right.
in the 90s. It had a very thriving sort of cinema, and we had the drive-in culture also. I used to go almost every other weekend with my parents to watch a film. And back then in the 90s, films used to be family outings and stuff. So
Right.
it used to capture my imagination, not just for cinematic reasons, obviously, because as kids, you really can't tell the difference between anything you're watching. But yeah, for me, I'm not going to pretend like I was a crazy cinema buff while growing up or while I was in college, or that this was this was my ambition to become a writer about cinema, about writer in general. I'm pretty normal in that sense. I sort of watched as many or as less films as anyone else while growing up in smaller towns in India. And for me, it was I wouldn't say it was an escape, but it was a very sort of good change from the cricket craze that was very prevalent in Ahmedabad that point of time. So it was either sort of Sachin and Shahrukh like the rest of the
Right.
country. So obviously, for us, most of our days were spent between choosing between the two. So my first kind of cinema I was exposed to were only Hindi films. I don't think I watched English films for a very long time. Of course, I only watched it on the TV. I never used to go to cinema halls to watch the big Hollywood releases. I think the first English film I watched in a cinema hall was Titanic in '97, like most other kids my age. So I think, it was a fair average sort of childhood in context of movies, I would say. I my real interest in movies as a medium started when I was in college. I studied in Xavier's College, Mumbai. And I lived quite far away from college because college is in town. It's in South Bombay, and most of us live in North Bombay. So just the commute is 1.5 hours to college. So if you're going to go to college, you're going to spend the whole day in town. You're not going to come back in 4 or 5 after bunking lectures, which
Right.
most of us used to do. So we used to, Xavier's is known for a lot of things, and one of the things it's known for, there are like 4 or 5 multiplexes or cinema halls. There were
Right.
single screen cinema halls around the college at that point. So uh, while a lot of Xavierites used to bunk lectures and go to the nearest bar to get their favorite drinks and beer and all, me and a couple of friends used to go to these single screen hall, watch movies mainly for the air condition because it was hot as hell throughout the college day. And back then we didn't have air conditioned classes and colleges, so we used to just spend a lot of time in theaters trying to escape from the heat. And in the process we discovered a lot about ourselves through the movies. And when I realized that movies can be a profession, it can be more than just a hobby. It can be, you can be a cinephile, so to say.
Mm.
So yeah, that's pretty much when when I discovered the power of cinema. I remember watching a lot of movies just because I just wanted to get away from college, and I had no interest in the movies. Like I still have not watched a lot of Harry Potter. I used to only watch them so that I could spend 2 hours in the
Mm.
theater at
Mm.
that point of time. So yeah, I mean it's pretty normal in that sense.
Sure. And how did that extend to, say, the Hollywood classics and then the foreign films and then regional films? Like, how did all of that come into the vocabulary?
So I still say a lot of it isn't in my vocabulary. The thing is, I'm not a very I don't look back on a lot of history of cinema. I wouldn't say it's a right or wrong way. There is no right or wrong way. But the first thing you're told as a film critic or as a reviewer in general, if you're going to make a career out of writing about films, is that you must know the history of cinema and you must
Right.
have enough knowledge about world cinema and all. I get it, but at the same time, it's also a cliche in the sense, because if you're like, I really like looking at films in context of the times they're made in, and in context of the future we are sort of headed in. Because if we tend to keep looking back on the history of cinema, we tend to keep making connections between the history and the present, which is good, which is necessary for a lot of new age sort of viewers. But for me, it's about looking at films as a person, as an individual, and then making your opinion on them as a person, rather than always looking at it through a context or a gaze. So I discovered a lot of old films and a lot of world cinema very late in life too. Like I still say I'm not very well versed in a lot of it. If, for example, if there were cinema buffs who are going to have a quiz with me right now, I'd lose hands down. It's not like of course, like everyone else, I've seen the classics. But I think around 2007 or 2008, after my college graduation, I did a course in Xavier's Institute of Communications, XIC, which is part of the Xavier's campus. I did a film and TV and video production course, which is basically a crash course in filmmaking for 1 year. Which was when I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So that also doubled up as a film appreciation course. And that's also when a lot of us who were laymen in the language of cinema, who were just cinema buffs entering a course, were exposed to this entire world of global cinema, regional cinema, a lot of other kinds of Indian films, a lot of history of cinema. So it's basically like AI but put into 1 year. And it was for me quite it was a useful experience, not on a professional level, because I didn't end up doing what most of us didn't end up pursuing that particular career, but it got me very interested in writing. It got me very interested in looking at films differently. I think we were shown a lot of very important films that we weren't aware of, like from the Citizen Kanes to the Ray films to a lot of films from France and even South Korea after a while. And the thing is, a lot of us were so formative in our language of films till then. We only looked at films as Hindi films up until then. We didn't have the kind of knowledge that a lot of cinephiles now do, because the internet wasn't that vast a medium in 2007. I know, like, sound like an old man when I say that, but I'm really it wasn't that far back. But back then it was just we just had IMDb to go to go and check out our favorite films and our favorite reviews. So I'd say that 1 year between 2007 and 8 opened me out to an entire other dimension of films. And that's when I think, even though it was the requisite of the course for you to sort of attend these classes and watch these films every Sunday, I think it ingrained in us the culture of consuming cinema as more than just a means of entertainment. It helped us learn the language of cinema. There were no professors really teaching us or pointing it out, but we opened ourselves out to cinema in our own individual ways. So yeah, if not for that course, I'm pretty sure I would have I wouldn't have discovered a lot of what was out there.
Right. And also, I wanted to ask, how easily did the grammar fit in for you? Right. Like, I mean it in a way that there are some people who, when they watched, say, a certain film, a certain foreign classic for the first time, it fit into their world right away. And then there are some whom I've spoken to, for whom it is acquired taste. Right, for whom it took a while to acquire that kind of taste, and who are still in the process. So, how easy was it for you to just watch it and then it becoming your taste?
See, it's not always easy, because when you are growing up in a particular era, okay, which is way after the films have been released, which is way after the classics have really released, what tends to happen is you're never going to experience the culture of the film or the moment of the film, so to say. You're always going to relive what the film should have, what the film meant basically at one point of time. You're going to learn about the film rather than watch the film. Okay, so the thing is, when you tend to watch these films, that's the perspective you have watching the classics. In your head, it's a classic, quotation mark classic. So the thing is, you're watching something important. So you're never going to watch it as a regular film, and you're never going to watch it in the time it was supposed to be watched. So I think that was that's what happened. Even like when I started watching it in 2007, that's exactly the kind of perspective we became aware of while we were watching the film, that you're going to understand how important it is, but it doesn't have to be something you love. It doesn't have to be something you swear by or name drop in conversations. And the thing is, I'll be honest, a lot of classics I've never really gotten the hang of, because I've just missed the time of the film.
Correct.
You know, I've just watched it too late in life or at a wrong point in life. Maybe I watched it when I was too young, you know, when my mind was still processing what cinema meant. Uh, or maybe sometimes I watched it in just because I was in a mood to watch something black or white, or a silent film, or a Citizen Kane or something. So I never really got the fuss. Like, I didn't watch Godfather properly till 2011 or 2012, which was when I was 25 or 26 years old. When it re-released in cinemas in Bombay, that's when I really went to watch it. Like, till then, I'd only seen snippets of it and only heard about it. And the thing is, when you watch films before your time, not before the film's time, then nothing can ever rescue your perspective. You know, like, you still ask me about a lot of classics, I will still not have very strong opinions on them, because I don't really feel for them as much as I do, say, when I watch films that release in the last 10 or 15 years, when my mind has been developed to consume films from my own era. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I you know, like, when someone comes to me saying what are the classics we have to watch, I have nothing to say, because I'm like, number one, it's too late. You know, you're not going to really get it. And I don't think the film wants you to get it either at this point of time when you're 21 years old. So let it go. You know, you let the films discover you over time, rather than you going out trying to watch everything because it's apparently you're apparently supposed to do that to discover, you know, to become a writer or to become a filmmaker. There is no hard and fast rule. You have to let these things happen in your own time, and it's not unpopular of you to say that you did not get a film, or you did not understand a film. I never understood, you know, I still don't understand a lot of films by Stanley Kubrick. He's never been my taste. Same with David Lynch. I would never name drop them in conversation because they meant nothing to me. You know, but if you talk about modern filmmakers, I'll tell you who have affected me and who have sort of influenced my way of looking at life. So yeah, that's how I've had a very different view of history in general.
Correct. Makes sense. I also want to ask about, so that you spoke about when you are suggesting films and all, I want to ask, how do you decide what to watch, right? How does your watch list gets decided? Is it the Netflix recommendations, or is it basically your friends recommending, or is it whatever's trending, or how exactly is it?
See, mostly because it's part of my job, I have to sort of keep a watch out for thing and what is not, right. My occupation isn't only limited to Indian films or Hindi films anymore, because streaming platforms have opened out the world to all kinds of cinema and all kinds of mediums. You have to keep a watch out for what is dropping on the internet every day. So I wouldn't say I go by trending lists or anything, but I know exactly what is which point of time, or what the discourse is like at every point of time. I don't force myself to watch these things unless I have to review them, unless it's part of my job as a film critic every Friday. But I normally discover things in my own time. You know, I recently wrote also in an article that, you know, I basically, I don't consciously wait. It's just that I don't feel the need to be part of a particular burning discourse about a show or a film, which tends to happen more and more often because everything goes viral these days on the internet. So you don't, I don't obviously get that FOMO sense that I need to be part of this conversation. I watch these films or these shows sometimes 1 or 2 years after they become popular, and that's when I discover them in my own time. So they're always at the back of my mind, and there is more and more to consume every time. But you have to really, like, at least as a professional writer, you have to really space it out in your head, because you tend to get you can get the amount of stuff that's out there, and you have to really use your mental bandwidth very carefully now. Like, for example, when I'm eating, I know what kind of stuff I want to watch. I'd rather watch a reality show, or I'd rather watch something that's lighter. If I have to watch the serious stuff, I'll watch it in the night before sleeping. But I'll discover stuff on my own on Netflix. I just sort of scroll through titles. You know how it is when you're looking at one title, they'll suggest other titles. That's how I discover most of my stuff. I don't discover it through Twitter or Facebook. I don't discover it through friends' recommendations. I discover it through the algorithm itself. What they tell me, I might be interested in.
Okay, but like, do you? So right now, I personally am at a place where, say, if I know that a filmmaker's film is going to come out, a very prolific filmmaker's film is going to come out, whatever I haven't watched of their filmography, I watch that. And so, is there a point where you've just been like, okay, I'll watch filmographies and I'll just watch, or is it too tiring? Or even say if a show ka new season is going to come out and everybody's talking about it, so just watching the previous 5 seasons and all of that. Have you ever been the kind?
No, I've never really done that, honestly. I guess it's also because it's a generation thing at the same time. Because, see, now the current generation is at a moment where they can afford to do this stuff also, because everything is pretty much available at the tip of
Correct.
your fingers. So you can actually go back to watching and preparing, so to say, for the new season or for a new film or for a filmmaker. The thing is, because I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, whatever, you could not always have the luxury of filmmakers' entire filmography, right? I mean, you have to find ways to just remember stuff. So I guess I guess the maximum I've done is when I was in college. I think when the last Lord of the Rings film was releasing, I think they were having a marathon in the cinemas throughout that week, and that was the maximum we would do. Like it's because that is what is being offered. But for example, if in movie halls they give me a chance to relive the Batman franchise or Nolan's franchise or any other filmmaker's franchise, if they say we are playing 3 films or 4 films a day of this filmmaker, I'd readily go for it. It's just that the culture isn't there. You have to do it on your own at home now. And most of us sometimes don't have the time to do it. As much as I would love to do it, because I don't like watching a new season without really being present in the moment of the previous season. And same for filmmakers' new film. But at the same time, I think it can also limit your perspective of the filmmaker's new film or the filmmaker's voice, because then you start comparing it immediately to, and you start expecting things, expecting a tone, expecting a theme. So I feel like if you watch every filmmaker's film individually and then later maybe connect the dots in your head over the years, that is, for me at least, my way of watching films. Because like I know whenever I watch Tenet, I'm not going to watch whole of Nolan's filmography or even his films that are similar to Tenet. I won't watch all of them. I just want to experience it organically at this point of time in 2020 as a storyteller, and then maybe figure out if I can at some point do a marathon of similar films.
Also, when you go to watch a film, do you have any preconceived notions? Like, I'll give you an example. For example, if you're going to watch, say, the next 1920 movie, right? Would it be about? And I'm not saying it in a way that being at a place where you would have a pre. I'm saying, do you think that it can deliver to a point that it intends to? Or do you have a preconceived notion that I might just end up laughing at the film? Like,
I mean, see, most of us do have preconceived notions when we enter the theater. We can't be dishonest about that, because we watch a lot of stuff, right? And we grow up watching stuff. So things that are sort of buried at the back of your brain. But your job as a professional is not to let those preconceived notions overwhelm your experience while watching the film. Because it's so easy that a filmmaker has made terrible films beforehand, and you go into the next film expecting a bad film, and then when it's not bad, you're like, oh shit, this is a brilliant film. Because he's not made a bad film, you tend to overestimate the film, right? Because you know so much about the filmmaker, being so cynical about his filmography before. And I think that's a lot of critics went through that when Anubhav Sinha sort of directed Mulk, I think, out of nowhere, because nobody expected him to do that. I think a lot of us were very favorable to that film also because it was Anubhav Sinha, not because the film was very good. Film was okay, film was decent, it got its politics right, but you can't say it was a great film. So I think a lot of us overreacted to that film because we went in with preconceived notions. And as a film critic, you have to be careful of these things over time, because no filmmaker will make a film all the time, and a filmmaker is only good as his last film at the same time. So there are so many contradictions in your mind at the same time that you have to you mustn't let your preconceived notions or your opinions or your judgments beforehand affect your experience of the film. Or even if it does affect your experience, you come out and think objectively, think rationally, think how the film worked as a film. And I guess over time, the more you do this, the more you get used to thinking like that.
But so the experience and to have a different experience and then to think about it objectively, how easy or difficult is that? I'll give an example where say there is a screening which you go for, right? Which is scheduled for 9 p.m. and it starts at 11 p.m. Like it happens a lot. Uh, how how does that change the viewing experience, and how much does that affect your
It
review?
does. I'm not going to lie. It does. Like it's not easy for a lot of people who watch it late nights, and because we are at the mercy of the screenings and the timings, and what the film wants us, how the film makers want the critics to watch it. So it does. You get frustrated. These small things can keep happening, but you cannot let it. I mean, even though you get mentally tired and physically tired and coming back at 2 a.m. and sort of trying to jot down your thoughts, then it's not easy. But over time, there will be more difficult weeks. There will be weeks where you go wrong as a film critic, or where you drop the ball slightly, saying, I was too tired. You let the frustrations of waiting for the screening affect your perception of the film. That tends to happen. And the best you can do is basically keep telling yourself that. It's independent. The circumstances of how you watch a film is independent, just as how the circumstances of a filmmaker making his or her film is independent. We will not, the way we shouldn't judge films according to the difficulties the filmmakers went through while making the film, or how much of their own money they put into it, and how much independent filmmakers struggle to make it. It should not matter to a critic. What should matter is what you're watching. The same way, even we shouldn't care about our circumstances when we go through shit trying to watch a screening or trying to review a film, because in the end nobody cares about that. Nobody And you'll be doing injustice to both the filmmaker and yourself as a critic. So yeah, it's difficult, but over time, the more seasoned you become, the more you learn how to deal with these small things.
And also, like if say a screening gets over at 2 a.m. or whatever, when is say your submission for film companion? I think the reviews are happening on are mostly on Friday. They come out on Friday, or sometimes even before that, depending on the embargo. But at least over there, I've never seen a review by you which came out a lot later. So is that an option, or what is the deadline situation like?
I mean, it's preferable that you put out reviews when all other publications put out reviews, which is Friday, unless the embargo ends earlier. Like for Serious Men,
Yeah.
I think it came out 3 days ago, and a lot of people did. So you only obviously always have to have an eye on competition, because that's how what film journalism is, or journalism in the country is. It's about putting your reviews, putting your articles out first, and if someone jumps the gun, that affects the whole ecosystem, because then everyone starts jumping the gun because they want to be in it. So you have to be careful, and these depends on the publication most of the time. It's not easy being a publication, or an editor in such a cutthroat environment. So of course, I wouldn't say there's ever been like like you absolutely have to put it down, but as a professional, if you're a film critic who's been doing this for a couple of years at least, that Friday morning in your head is when the review should go out, whether you like it or not. Like, you have to figure it out, unless you're watching the film itself on Friday morning, in which case it's Friday evening.
Yeah, but
so
that's
how it is.
Right? Earlier it was Saturday morning, Sunday morning.
I will not lie. I would prefer that environment, honestly, when it was Monday, when it also gave the time to the film to breathe, through the weekend. And then people would watch the film and then read the reviews, which is how it should always be, in my opinion. But the more the internet has sort of evolved, the more the digital scene has evolved, it's very easy to say this is how it should be now, but it's never going to be. Look at the amount of players in the environment. Everyone's at competition with each other. So if someone's putting it out on Friday morning at 6 a.m., if you're not putting it out at 9 a.m., then you may not exist as a publication next day. So you have to keep doing it, and you have to keep an eye and be respectful of the filmmakers at the same time. The problem is breaking embargoes, and you need to be careful of that. And I think because of the digital streaming platform scene right now, I think a lot of people are learning to respect embargoes a little more than earlier.
Of course, they're like better than those now watching interval block tweets and all those.
Oh yeah, that's the death of film journalism most of the time, and now we are told not to do that. It's amazing that we have to be told these things, that do not tweet about a film, do not write, give away spoilers, do not, it's basically about journalists wanting to boast that they're getting to see the film before everyone else, and there are journalists like that in every ecosystem, not just films. So the thing is, you need to rein in those people and make sure there's a fair chance for everyone, that everyone's playing a fair game. Because a lot of bigger critics get to watch special screenings way before, at least before the pandemic. A lot of them, used to get to watch it on Monday, while a lot of us younger critics
Wednesday,
get
Thursday.
to watch it on a Thursday or Friday. So, and their reviews used to be out before we even entered the theater. So it's not a level playing field. But the only good thing, about the last 8 months that has happened is it's sort of uniformized the streaming of opinion in general. It streamlined the opinion. You don't see film reviewers jumping the gun anymore. You don't see people getting special screenings anymore. So it's a good thing that.
Also, I wanted to ask about, say, do you think that even you have to cater, right? Like, even so, let's talk about this, that you have an audience, right? Everybody has an audience per se, where so if you say abuse a Khan movie, then the fans troll you. But not abuse, but say do not like a Khan movie, then the fans troll you. But even if you like it, then there will be people who have appreciated your work. And if you say like an Anees Bazmi movie, there will be people who have appreciated your criticism over the years, like your writing over the years, who might have a problem with that. So do you think that even you have the responsibility to cater?
Yeah, so the thing is, I don't have a responsibility to cater, but I'm very aware. That's a good question, because that happens to a lot of film critics in general, because every film critic has their own section of readers, and they tend to, most people, let's not kid ourselves, most people start reading critics because they agree with their opinions, not because they disagree with their opinions.
100%.
The writing comes later for a lot of people. As much as I would love to believe that the writing is important, a lot of people do it because they resonate with certain critics. So obviously, if that critic suddenly goes against your opinion and surprises you, you'll feel a little let down as a reader, as a person. But our job as the new generation of film critics is to dissuade people from feeling that way, to get them out of that culture and start reading reviews for not for agreeing with them, but also respecting them for disagreeing with them. Because a lot of us grew up reading reviews from the West of films of reviewers we absolutely never agree with most of the time. Who would agree with a Richard Brody? He's always has sort of an anti stance most of the time. It's always an provocative anti stance. So and if you close yourself out to reviewers who don't have the same opinion as you'll never end up reading people most of the time. But this happens to me quite a bit, because I think I got a lot of abuse, I think a lot of trolling last year, because I really liked Chichore. And I gave it a positive review. And a lot of people messaged me personally saying, we didn't expect this from you. We always trust your views, and you've let us down. And I was like, boss, I like the film. I'm putting it out there. It's your problem if you want to follow my reviews after this or not. You're not. I'm not in this to agree with you or to actually cater to what you think about a film. It's lovely that you read me so passionately that you feel hurt by this. That's a compliment. But this is nothing to feel hurt about. Like you are not supposed to agree with me most of the time. That is how we start a discourse, and that is if you don't like the tone of my review, if it's arrogant, that's a different matter. But if you don't like the opinion, I can't do anything about it. I have a lot of unpopular opinions over the years, and with Hindi cinema, it's more pronounced than most other things. Than other things I write about. So people over time, I've realized they've learned to deal with it, because in 2016-17, when I was still sort of rising up the ranks in general, I think a lot of people were getting used to the way I write, or used to the way I think. A lot of people, I used to get told a lot for not liking anything. But now I don't see complaints like that anymore. And if you actually make a complaint like that anymore, it actually reflects more about the reader than the reviewer most of the time, because you have developed your base of readers of of the people you discuss films with. And now the smarter readers know very well that you're not supposed to agree with the critic most of the time, but if the writing appeals to you, well and good.
Sure. I want to talk about certain terms which are used a lot, right? And I'm not just saying in terms of film critics. I'm not saying you use it, but in terms of, say, a lot of film lovers in on film pages and all. I want to know your opinion on of these words, and if you understand them, then please try to explain what do you think is overrated, underrated? What is this debate?
See, like I think most of us have grown up with this vocabulary, right? Because it's a very lazy way of saying that a film that deserves love did not got way too much, like did not get love, and a film that didn't get love got way too much. I mean, these are obviously lazy terms that a lot of writers, not just Indian writers, like a lot of writers over the years have coined to sort of put a lot of films under one umbrella rather than go into analysis, or rather than look at each film for its merits and demerits. They start to bunch together films under a certain genre of film viewing. So I guess I'm not a big fan of those terms, but I used to use them myself in my college days or when I started out my reviewing career. So I won't be surprised if I go through my reviews and type in the word underrated, overrated. There'll be a bunch of reviews from 2014 or 15. But the trick is over time to realize that these words mean nothing if you can't justify them. You
No,
can
but
use overrated.
no, my
Huh.
point is when you use them, in what context are they? I'll tell you what I'm talking about exactly. So, for example, on the same film page on the same day, I've seen two different posts calling Lutera. One says it is overrated, one says it is underrated. So, is it about the fine? Is it about the critical appreciation? Is it about the box office? What is that about?
I think it's a generic term that puts all appreciation together or under appreciation together, or whatever it is. It basically distills the entire reaction of the film at a time into one word. Like for example, a lot of films grow on us over time, right? Like films like Lutera and all that did not get acclaim when it released, or whether it was box office acclaim or whether it was critical acclaim. Over time, people have obviously started to warm up to it and look up to it. So you'll use the term underrated for that reason because it wasn't appreciated. It was and when it released, and same for overrated. A lot of films that are praised when they released, whether it earned a lot of money or whether they were critically acclaimed. I'd like to believe it has more to do with critical acclaim, but there's also the box office at play. You cannot
Yeah,
ignore that. If it's a big hit, like Razi, for example, is a film that is overrated for so many people
right.
because a lot of it got reviewed so well when it released. It earned a lot of money. It won a lot of awards, but it has not aged well. It has not sort of grown on people the way people expected it to. It was a very in the moment film. So, in the loosest way, I'd call that overrated for me.
Sure, sure.
So, yeah, I mean,
Like,
as much as the term doesn't
but
sound
Lutera
nice,
was
it's a
loved by critics, right? Like I remember it being the most critically appreciated film when it had come out and all of that
yeah,
stuff.
I don't remember much. I didn't like Lutera when it released, and I won't say that I've seen it many times after that. But even other films, I mean, there are many other examples you can give. And Lutera, yeah, I think it got a lot of strong reviews when it released and all. So I wouldn't understand calling that film underrated right now because
Yeah,
it was actually
yeah.
rated very highly. But then at the back of everyone's mind is flop kyun hua?
Correct. So
That's the thing.
that's
Like that's
contradiction.
also, yeah, and that's like using the term ahead of its time, right?
Ah,
You'll do that because Sholay was ahead of its time, like Hum was ahead of its time, and all these things were because they weren't appreciated or they flopped when they released. And you're obviously going to have to find a term that's the easiest way to describe it. So it's a lazy way of doing it, but I get the essence of what they are trying to say.
okay. One more term is indulgent or overindulgent. What do you think that
I
is?
mean, indulgent is a. I mean, I believe that Tarantino is the reason that phrase exists. Like if not for him, I don't think a lot of film critics or cinephiles over the world would have ever known what the term meant in terms of film culture or in terms of cinematic context. Because he is the filmmaker it started with, and since then, a lot of filmmakers have been given that term, like Anurag Kashyap and that entire
Anurag
fraternity.
Basu.
So yeah, Anurag Basu. So you use indulgent to when a filmmaker decides to force his individuality onto the film. I don't think it's a bad term, honestly.
Correct.
Indulgent is actually can be a good term, but
Correct.
when you use overindulgent as criticism, you have to use it in context of what you are trying to say about the film. You can't just say the film is overindulgent. But how? Why is overindulgent a bad thing? Because in general in life, indulging is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So like these terms, when coined in within film culture, they tend to assume a life of its own. So even as film writers, our term is to correct that and course correct that over time, and maybe not use those terms as much as possible because those everyone uses, and you have to find new ways of analyzing films and reflecting on them.
Okay. What about curse of the second half? Right. I've heard this so many times. It's weird because I've even read it in reviews of English films. where there's no first half, second half.
That is weird. That's again, that's only an Indian thing. We can very proudly say it's an Indian thing because we have intervals. But again, it's such an easy. See, the thing is, I can understand why again the term is used because film screenplays are also conceived keeping first halves and second halves in mind. The
Yeah,
narrative beats are conceived by writers and filmmakers, keeping the fact that there will be a break in the middle of the film in mind. So it's fair in a very basic sense of a term. That term I understand writing about the first half separately and the second half separately.
mm,
But you cannot oversimplify it to a way where you say that the film suffers from the curse of a second half
correct.
because that is basically meaning to say that the film was basically two different films and it didn't make sense after the interval. The writers were sort of lost the plot, the actors lost the plot. It's just there are so many things that can, you'd rather say something like that the film sort of loses the hold that it had in the in the beginning. I always try to use the I try to talk in terms of the acts of the narrative or
Mm,
the first hour or the second hour
mm,
rather than half and second half because it's such a over abused term that it tends to reflect badly on on the reviewer and the reader who reads it. Then like हमारा vocabulary और उनके vocabulary में what is the difference?
correct. Correct. And lastly, there are two terms which I want to mention. One is sharp editing, and one is crisp writing. So these,
Oh man.
is it meant like? I want to know that can that be valid criticism? What and why do people think that?
See, I don't know. It's I'm glad you. I mean, that's a good thing to you brought up because I've had such a problem against the word crisp or delicious used in reviews that I've just like lost my head trying to explain to people that you do not use it in context of films and storytelling and art. You use it for food. You can't do this with films. But yeah, it's see again, it's a sharp editing is because editing is it's obviously people make such a simplistic association because editing means scissors, it means cutting, so they think if it's sort of edited well you can call it sharp editing, which is again a very Indian way of doing things. And the same for crisp writing because I don't know what crisp writing is. I mean, you can say that the screenplay was tight, the pace was tight, something, but you can't say that the writing. It's just this obsession of using adjectives in reviews because adjectives tend to sort of give the viewer or give the reader a very definite view of the film, right? Whether you liked it or not, whether it's a good or bad. So it's the same with words like crisp and sharp because it then gives the reader a sense that the reviewer is impressed by the film, and that's the easiest way to put it across, and it's the stupidest way to put it across. But I blame my previous generation of film critics for all these terms, because they used it a lot in newspapers and in their reviews, and it's the reason our entire generation has sort of inherited it from them. And I used to read their reviews, and I used to be bowled over by these terms, saying, I don't understand. And they still use it. If you look at their tweets, they will still use these
Yeah, yeah.
words. And, it's up to
I've read
an
it
entire
recently, right?
generation of writers to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
read recently like
absolutely.
one
Like,
word review and all of that, and I'm like, one word review kya hota hai, right? Like, what is one time watch? My favorite of
yeah,
films, I haven't watched them the second time, right? That doesn't mean that I'll
yeah.
call it one time watch.
No, it's just it's again it's like giving it's just whether 2 or 3 stars or whatever. It's like putting words to the stars. One time watch and sharp and this and that. So it's again there's no end to that culture, but it's up to the another next generation of writers to change that vocabulary, right? Otherwise, we can still bitch about these terms for 10 years down the line. Also, nothing will have changed.
Okay, my final question is that you write about films and sports. Uh,
Yeah.
which fans are more vicious? Is it Salman Khan fans or is it Dhoni fans? So,
Oh man, great question. I think both fans are the same. Sometimes I feel Salman Khan's are Dhoni fans, but again, see, idol worship in both like sports and films are very similar. You can't really you distinguish between the two. So I'm not surprised the kind of trolling I get for my Dhoni opinions as opposed to like. Of course, there's more of a divide in Bollywood in the sense there are Salman Khans, fans, there are Shah Rukh fans, there are certain actresses fans, there are fan groups and entire Twitter accounts dedicated to that. But the problem with sports fans or sports fanatics, so to say, is they spill over into all walks of life. You
Right.
cannot tell a Dhoni fan if you see them on the road, or if you talk to them at a party, or if you talk to them on the phone. But they become vicious online because they have the luxury of not revealing the identity of their
Right.
faces. And it's amazing because it really works so well with the idol worship we have in this country. Like, forget Dhoni fans, BJP fans, like all so many kinds of
Right.
arenas you see, and you keep seeing it, and it's amazing that it happens to like mostly like legends like if Sachin was in this era, if he was playing, it would have been far more vicious. I have a feeling Dhoni
Sure.
is sort of filling in for Sachin at this point of time in terms of superstar value. So yeah, I'd say like the cricket fans are far more dangerous in that sense because the Dhoni fans or the fan clubs are more dangerous because you can't see them coming. Honestly, the most knowledgeable people will turn out to be absolute like
Correct.
stubborn, absolutely disoriented sports fans, and then get personal with you saying, "Tu films ke bare mein hi likhna, nobody asked you about sport." I was like, I was like, I think I grew up in India where both are pretty much religions. How the hell can you only think in terms of one?
Right.
So yeah, so yeah.
Okay, perfect. This was great, Rahul. Thank you so much for doing this with us. And
No, no, thanks a lot.
I'm really happy we were able to speak about film criticism and about films in general. And I really enjoyed this talk. Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah. Thanks, Akash.